I'm Katie Bennett-Stenton, a senior B2B marketer with 20 years experience across the UK, the United States and Asia Pacific. I recently returned from an exciting 3 months with Deloitte in Chicago, where I put my kids into school and finalised their US citizenship. During that time, I was delighted to have the opportunity to spend time with a number of global experts. Throughout that period, I interviewed a range of thought leaders and shared their thought-provoking, relevant and influential takeaways. Now I'm back in Melbourne. The hashtag Katie Talks conversation with influencers continues. Today I'm speaking with Katherine Mountford, a specialist marketing and business development recruiter. After holding senior marketing and BD positions in international professional services firms in London and Asia, Katherine moved into recruiting and now talks a lot about understanding business needs, plus the benefits of high-quality strategic recruitment rather than, as she phrases it, bums on seats. Katherine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Me too. Now, as we were chatting before we started recording, we talked a little bit about our background in terms of how we met and have gotten to know each other. Katherine, Great story and example of the benefits of social media. I might ask you to relay that story.
Yeah, so we were at the Icon, I think it was still APSMA then, pre-Icon conference. You were talking and you also interviewed Amanda Gome as well. And I think I went up to you in a break and had a chat and we got talking. And that was the only time we've ever met. Now, that must be 2+ years ago.
Yeah.
Nearly 2.5 years ago.
I would think.
We've only met that once, but I feel like we know each other really well, and that's because of social media. We're both fairly active on Twitter and obviously LinkedIn as well. We're both on there regularly. And I think what's happened is that by being connected on there and watching each other and commenting and observing, I think we've realised we've got things in common. We have shared interests. I knew about your family trip to the US and was able to observe that through social media channels. And we've really sort of formed a bond through those channels. So if we'd have just met that once, we'd have never been sitting here today doing the podcast. So if that doesn't demonstrate the power of social media, I don't know what does.
Absolutely. I think that's a delightful preamble to what we're going to talk about today. Katherine, how is your life and career improving as a result of being better connected with people across the globe?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I'm inherently fascinated by people, and I've been lucky enough to live in a few different countries. So cultural differences, communications differences are really interesting to me. And I'm really blessed to have a strong network globally, just as a result of meeting people over the years. And there are many years that I've had working, who I've kept connected with through social media. So having a number of people in different places, you get a different perspective, a different mindset, a different cultural view. People who've worked in different markets have a different perspective on careers and what they might want out of their next step. So it's very enriching to talk to people who come from such different backgrounds and with such different mindsets.
I think a lot of those things that you say are true, and working in different countries and different cultures is really quite enriching and just helps give a broader perspective to the value that you're able to add.
Yeah, I mean, we are encouraged to celebrate diversity, and I think we're doing well, but we could always do better.
Yes.
And there's nothing more challenging really on a diversity perspective than looking globally for the right person for a job and looking out into all markets, all levels, people from all backgrounds. Some people will be listening to this thinking, well, there's not that much diversity in professional services marketing, and they are right. But having, I suppose, lived in a few markets as well, I've been able to observe culture at a slightly different level. And I'd encourage anyone who's thinking about their career and who's still in a position to go out and work elsewhere if they can, as you did recently when you had your trip to the States and you were working there. If you can get that opportunity, go and seek it. It's very enriching.
I agree, and I think, I worked in the UK for 2 years and then moved to the States for a year or so before I came back home. And having a couple of small children, I thought perhaps at least for the next 10, 15 years living and working abroad was at least for a while, behind me. But I was, so thrilled, and not just my life enriched by having that opportunity last year, but the kids as well. So it was wonderful to be able to see that at perhaps any stage in your career there is an ability to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's always a way if you want it.
Yeah.
Different markets go through different phases as well. Some markets are really interesting and growing at the moment. I'm talking about different maybe global financial sectors. Some are a little bit flat. If you are able to move to a growing, changing market for a couple of years and get some good career development there, then, go for it.
Absolutely. Katherine, as you mentioned earlier, you and I met and connected when I was presenting on personal branding and social media. Why are you such an advocate for social media?
I think that's a good demonstration of why. In terms of, I love connecting and building relationships is kind of the core of me. And so being able to do that and take it to a different level, either that you've met somebody in person first and then you can enrich that relationship online like we did, but also I have started my relationship with a lot of people online and then met them in person, or actually never met them in person but still feel I have a relationship with them. So it gives you another way to connect with like-minded people, or to challenge yourself to listen to people who aren't quite so like-minded, who are also out there as well. And I try to make myself follow and listen to people who don't agree with me, because you sometimes find yourself in an industry or an environment or in a group of friends who all agree with you. You all have the same views. So I find that's quite a nice, another added value of social media. But certainly from career seeking perspective, if you've got some good experience, plus you've got a good personal brand online that your future employers can touch, feel, see, hear, you are going to stand a much better chance of being hired by an organisation if they get the whole picture of you. So from a career perspective, it's a very valuable tool.
I'm really interested in a few points you mentioned there, particularly engaging with and observing and following people who don't agree with you. I heard a really great interview with Madeleine Albright on an Atlantic podcast recently, and she was talking about listening to strongly right-wing Christian radio in her car on the way to work, and talked about flipping people the bird. She's so offended by some of what they say, but she reinforced the importance of that, and I think it's a good one. I probably need to get a little bit better at it. But
well, I think we all could do, because we like to hear things that back up our own views in the first place, don't we? But and I think podcasts are a great way to do that.
Absolutely.
You can switch it off if you want to, if you get too offended. You could be maybe doing something else at the same time. So if you're already doing the washing up or the hoovering or something, you're not wasting any time by dipping into something that's a bit different. So it's a good tool.
No, they're a great tool. I mean, I will often, when cooking or going for a run or riding my bike to work, we'll often listen to one. So it's it's sort of making the most of what in some ways is, although running's not dead time, but that adding some multitasking in there.
Absolutely.
Katherine, I think in the recruiting world, we've all read articles about CVs perhaps being a little bit exaggerated, but I'm keen to understand what mistakes you've seen people make as they're looking for new roles and next steps in their careers.
Yeah, I guess flipping that slightly to talk about maybe some areas that people could really focus on, and I think areas of development. The majority of candidates that I meet will have CV homework.
Okay.
And so anyone listening to this who's been a candidate of mine will probably be smiling now or grimacing. And the main reason for that is that I see a real leaning towards people talking about what they do rather than what they've achieved.
Okay.
And to position yourself for your next career move on paper and verbally, you really need to be able to articulate what you've achieved, because that's what you could help the next organisation achieve. So I often use the Usain Bolt example, which is if you ask Usain Bolt what he did, or to talk about himself, if he said, well, I run, I'm a runner and I do some running and I've run in some races, you might just think, oh, well, he's fine, but you don't get a sense of what is it. If Usain Bolt said to you, well, I've won X amount of Olympic golds, I've beat this world record, I train 6 days a week to be the best in the world, you'd get more of a sense of what he could do for you. Okay.
It's a very poignant and simple example.
Well, that is a very simplistic example, but to take maybe a more appropriate example. So, rather than saying I manage a team, I manage online and offline marketing projects, I write this strategy for my business unit, you could say things like, I've developed and grown a team of 10, resulting in, significantly improved outputs and anecdotal feedback from the business, or have developed a new client development strategy, resulting in 20% increase in cross-selling of existing clients, for example. People cannot fail to sit down and think, oh, we'd like one of those. We'd like someone to come and do that for us.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what the word mistake or the word development area, that's probably the thing I see the most offers, is the most common, the most often amongst all levels, all seniorities, all stages in career, is flipping to talking about achievements rather than doing.
Okay. I like it, and I'm thinking about my current profile and wondering what homework I need to be doing on that front.
Everybody always needs homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Katherine, is there any one thing you'd change about the business environment of today?
We were talking about this before we started recording, and I think probably there's. I would love to see more listening. And related to that is hearing.
Okay.
Actually hearing people, so listening and hearing and taking that in. I think in business there's a tendency to want to prove your worth by telling or doing or talking or interrupting at times.
Yes.
and I've been, guilty of this. I think we all have. But certainly for me is the listening and hearing. I think a greater encouragement of authenticity and empathy would go a long way, and I think some organisations have got quite a long way to go on that. As in my 20s, I certainly felt I needed to play a role. I needed to be how I thought I should be in business. Yes. I needed to act how I thought I should act. And with the benefit of age, I know I can be more authentic and more myself now, and that's okay. Wouldn't it be nice if we could encourage that from an earlier stage in people's careers and demonstrate that from the top, that we don't all need to be the same? Absolutely.
And when we were talking earlier, that resonated particularly with me. I mean, I similarly in my 20s felt the need to be a little bit of a pigeonhole and very much like everybody else. And now again, perhaps with the passage of some time, feel much more comfortable and confident in being really authentic and could cite a whole bunch of examples where that's actually been really additive to my career. Being as one of the senior partners I work with describes me as infatigable. So, just endless, very, very energetic, and that being a good thing rather than sort of needing to tamp down energy and passion.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be nice if it was this skill set that was taught in schools and not just maths and reading? And I know schools are desperately trying to do more, but some classes on self-care, self-compassion, celebrating differences would be a wonderful toolkit for children to then grow into their adult life with. Maybe that is happening now, but I don't know to what extent. Certainly many years ago when I was at school, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a really interesting question. It's certainly something I talk to my kids about a lot. I'm not sure. I might have to do a little research on that.
It would be interesting to know if that's on the curriculum or thought about with regards to the curriculum, because we work in the professional services world, and when I'm interviewing people for professional services roles, one of the biggest things I'm looking for is how they can influence and manage stakeholders.
Yes.
It's relationships, it's communication, it's influencing, it's knowing how to deal with different types of people in different situations, in a different context. That is all stuff you learn as you are developing your own relationships in life.
Absolutely.
But I would argue it's one of the most valuable tools to success in the industries that we're in.
Oh, I agree. And I think it is absolutely an art form. And, you know, just as we talk about from a client or customer perspective, what works for one person is not going to be the same for another. Everybody's going to have their own take on that. And I think working in a large partnership, as I have for most of my career, the ability to consult and listen, and the art of senior people feeling heard, even if their view is not the one that is, you know, preeminent at the end of the day when you're putting a marketing strategy together. It's incredibly important and can very much make or break your success or ability to be impactful.
Yeah. Okay, so if anyone out there wants to commission a study into what's going on in schools, please do. Come back to us.
We would welcome that with open arms. Katherine, are there any significant challenges that you've navigated in your career that you've drawn specific strength or insight from that you would like to share?
So many significant challenges, partly self-induced, I'd suggest.
Sure.
But I suppose for me, I think the biggest one has got to be that I was very sick in 2010, 2011, and it turned out that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME as we refer to it in the UK. And so I was kind of asleep for 2.5 years. I had to give up work, had to stop my career, and my wonderful husband Ian was able to support me through that very difficult time. And I realised that pretty much all my identity was wrapped up in my career, and then I didn't have an identity all of a sudden. Then I had to get back to some semblance of working and having identity again, and I really had no choice but to sit back and reflect on how I'd got there in the first place, which was a lot about perfectionist tendencies, working all hours, burning the candle at both ends, which I know you can relate to as well. Really being tough on myself, inner critic, trying to be the best I could be at all times, really berating myself for anything that looked like a failure. I mean, there was so much learning. We could do a whole podcast just on that alone. But as a result of that, I actually feel I'm kind of in hindsight glad it happened, because I was able to take stock and think about what's important to me. How am I going to talk to myself from now on? How am I going to work, live, act? How am I going to get balance? And now, again, some candidates who've met me who seem like they're worn out will know that I've said to them, you really need to be careful, and this is why. And so it's not just helped me, but I think I've been able to help others by passing on that advice around balance, self-care, self-compassion, so that you can be the best person you are in the workplace. This is not about not working or not working hard or not being the best you can or doing the best you can, but it's about getting balance right, so when you do show up, you can be the best that you want to be.
I think this is an incredibly interesting conversation. In a podcast I published earlier this year with Grant Hyde, one of Deloitte Australia's senior partners, we had a very similar conversation, and he had a similar experience, as had I. And, you know, I had a virus, which basically meant a few years ago that I had 3 months that I pretty much spent in bed. You know, I was in the office for about 5 hours once a week. And I found that to be very, very confronting, because it turns out that getting up at 6 for a run and then burning the candle at the other end of the day and working incredibly long hours ultimately was not sustainable. And it's been surprising to me. I've had a number of colleagues come and initiate some conversations about that very thing, having heard it. And I think a few of them felt younger, so less advanced in their careers, but really felt that it was okay to have a very frank conversation about that, because they had heard someone very senior in the firm talking about it. And I think bringing more of that into the public realm is a really good discussion. I mean, we're reading a lot more about balance in life and having, I mean, I don't talk about a work-life balance. I think my personal take on it is that you have a balanced life. But I think having more honest conversations about this means that others can as well, and I think that can only benefit the greater community.
Absolutely, and it's just triggered a thought of mine, which is the era when, LGBTIQ, as I think it is now, started as something shorter acronym, but it's that now. When the first conversation started about that in firms to try and encourage people to be more open, and I remember Baker McKenzie quite early on led from the front around that and had some very open discussions coming from partners about their own experiences of being gay, and that encouraged more junior staff to be open as well about their sexuality. And maybe we're at that point now with regards to mental health, self-care. Those of us who do speak out, maybe we do encourage others to do the same.
No, I think that can only benefit all concerned. I was talking to somebody last week who is a senior leader at Fairfax, and was talking about the fact that he coaches his son's basketball at 3:30 on a Friday now. Was talking about the fact that that's about the busiest time in a newsroom in a week, but that as a senior leader, it's really critical for him to be very open about that and very, very honest about it. So although everybody is in mad, incredibly frenetic stage, he always makes a point when he's leaving of saying, "Hi, see you guys. I'm off to coach basketball," and being seen to really live that as being really, really critical.
And that's the only way you can do it, is to get leaders to act in a way that you want others to as well.
Yes.
So I think that's excellent.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I really liked that as well. Katherine, what's your favourite song and why?
This is a really hard one because I am a musician by trade. I did a music degree and I'm a cellist. So classical music is big to me. And I just love music. My husband gets a bit fed up with our family because we sing all the time. And actually my office colleagues as well share the same frustration because any word can trigger me to sing a related song.
Fabulous.
So it's a bit Von Trapp family, really.
Love it.
So it's very difficult for me to talk about one song. From a classical perspective, Elgar Enigma Variations always makes me cry. It's got personal connotations as well. So I would definitely have to have that in my list. Coldplay Fix You gets to me. Can't explain why, but it does. And then I think there would have to be a Dire Straits song in there because that was my first live concert. My dad took me to Dire Straits when I was 10. But I'm not sure I can pick which one.
Can't narrow it to one?
I don't know.
Okay.
Do I?
No, that's all right.
Can I have the whole album?
Sure. Brothers in Arms?
Yeah, I'm gonna have the Brothers in Arms album. There you go.
Yeah. No, I like that one. I can remember my dad going to one of their concerts and coming home with Mark Knopfler sweatbands.
What, his own sweatbands?
No, I don't think so. I don't actually. No, I don't.
They would be very sweaty.
They would be very sweaty. No, I don't think so. Katherine, if you could invite 3 guests, living or not, to dinner, who would they be?
Gosh. My grandma is one, Olive, my nanny Olive, who's 98. She is in the UK and I'm living in Sydney, so I don't see her very often. She's an absolute inspiration. She's incredible. In fact, last night on Twitter, I did post my 3 inspirations based on a conversation I'd had with my husband yesterday, and then you've asked me this question about 3 guests. So I suppose the 2 could correlate. So definitely my grandma Olive, amazing, lost both her parents early on, is eternally positive, can do, kind, generous, brave. She's fully there. She FaceTimes and WhatsApps with me at 98. Yes,
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay.
She has an iPad and an iPhone and is just a total inspiration. So she's coming to dinner.
She's coming to dinner.
Yeah. There's a lady called Claire Lomas who's from the UK. Claire was paralysed in 2007. She had a horse riding accident. And I followed Claire on Twitter for many years, incredibly inspiring. She has a robotic suit that enables her to walk. She was paralysed from the chest down. Has done various marathons. She's now learning how to ride a motorbike. She's an author, she's a speaker, she has two children and an amazing husband by the looks of what I can see on Twitter. I would love to sit down and talk to her. Okay. She believes that it has all been for good. Sorry, Claire, if that's you're listening and that's overstating it, but she has such a positive attitude to what's happened, and I think that's really, really inspiring.
Couldn't we all learn from that?
Yeah, so anyone who wants to look at Claire on Twitter, it's Claire with an I, so CLAIRE 80 Lomas. So Claire 80 Lomas is her Twitter handle. Amazing woman. I'd love to meet her. My third one, actually now I'm torn. We talked about this just before we went live. Malala is a total inspiration. I know you took your daughter to hear her speak.
She was amazing.
I'd have loved to have heard her speak. I think what an amazing woman.
Yes.
With the risk of getting slightly teary, I did lose a friend a few years ago. And so just when you ask me that question now, my friend Anna, who I was at school with, who sadly died a few years ago, I think I might bring her back for dinner and have a laugh with her.
Okay, well, you could have Malala and Anna.
I think I will do. I think maybe Anna's always there helping me laugh because she was such a great spirit. So, yes.
Sounds like an excellent dinner. I like it. Katherine, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Oh, this is really difficult because I've been given a lot of advice. Not all good. Some people have told me without necessarily knowing that I wanted to hear. I'd probably say my dad gave me some very early on business advice pre getting into business at all. I was a teenager. I needed a job. I wanted a job. And I needed to write a CV and a cover letter. And I thought, well, my dad's already done loads of those. He could just write it for me. And he refused to do so. He said, no, you've got to write it yourself. You've got to do a draft. You've got to get it to where you think it's right before I have a look at it. I was furious. I remember sitting in my dining room thinking, that's so unfair. He's done this. Why can't he just help me? But what it taught me was have a go yourself, do the best you can first, and then seek help. And you will learn a lot quicker than if someone else does it for you. I mean, you know, it's really difficult even at my age to admit that my dad gave me a very useful tip as a teenager, but I've put it out there now.
Kudos, Katherine.
Yes.
Katherine, our final question for today. Your professional focus helps significantly for others to shape their careers. Do you have any final career advice for listeners out there?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'd probably go back to the think about your achievements. And on that topic, I had a coffee with a guy the other week who had just started a new job. He's an amazing guy, and I've sort of seen him through a couple of moves in his career. And I said, right, you know, how's it going? First few weeks, I said, start making a note of your achievements, because when you're ready to move again, which could be a long way off, you'll remember what you've achieved. He said, I've only just started this job. I would never have thought of that, but I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like keep a live CV. Don't forget what you've achieved. Your week goes so fast, your month goes so fast that you forget what you've done. But some of those things you've done along the way can be really important messages for a future employer.
Sure.
So keep a live CV. Treat yourself to a nice notebook. Put it on your desk. If you like Moleskine or you like Kiki K, other brands are available. Go and buy one. Write it down. At the end of the day, just so that you don't forget. And I think for maybe the younger people that I meet, be patient. Be patient. Work hard. Things won't come to you immediately. You have to put in the hard graft. You have to be prepared to put in the work to get results. And in a world where positive affirmation and immediate gratification is available, I'm afraid workplaces don't cater for that and don't suit that. And that's quite difficult for younger people to adjust to. So be patient, be prepared to work. Don't expect everything to happen straight away. And I suppose my other bit of advice is think about what is your purpose? What's your personal purpose? Why are you doing what you're doing? And is doing what you're doing aligning to that? And don't be afraid to be authentic and be really comfortable in your own skin. If where you are now or what you're doing now doesn't feel right, change it. Don't do it because your family are proud of you or other people think you're great or, you think this is the route you should take in your career.
Okay.
Have the courage to sit back, think about what you really want out of life and go and do it. That would be my advice.
Some good advice there, Katherine. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I think at some point we might follow up with a second podcast because there are some more topics that we've covered that I'd like to dig into more. Really enjoyed it.
Yes.
I know that listeners are going to take a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Let's do it again soon.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Katherine.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Katie Talks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review me on iTunes to help others find this great content. I have some excellent thought leaders coming up in the series. Subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. I love feedback from listeners. You can find me at Katie B Marketing on Twitter or Katie Bennett-Stenton on LinkedIn.